Chapter 8. An Angel in the Rain. 1. My bus pulled in nearly an hour late. It was still dark out, and the sun would be coming up soon. Mom and Dad stood, waiting as we wheeled in. Dad was smiling at the driver, but pointing at his watch. With haste, I exited, gathering bags and uniform, kissed Mom, and tossed my bag into the back of Dad's truck. We had barely had a chance to say hello as Dad threw the transmission into drive and was zipping around the mostly empty Saturday morning streets to the other side of town. Over a year had passed since I'd seen Mom and Dad, and our first time together in all that time was not much more than a scattering of words on the way home from the station, which included Mom asking me if my speech was ready. I explained that after the mayor's speech, I was only standing at the end to say a quick thank you. Mom's response was, you should be giving the speech. Once home, I had to jump into the shower, get dressed, and get to the square, on foot. Dad would need his truck to take Mom to the square later. I wouldn't be caught dead driving the van. The Buick was in somebody's garage, getting oil and filters changed. I was supposed to be a little early to hear what the mayor wanted me to do, if different than what he'd already said. Which wasn't the plan, but Dad, thinking the bus would arrive on schedule and that he had time, still had to get ready and would bring Mom with him as soon as he was. I was eager to give Mom and Dad a real hug and have a real conversation, but that would have to come later. I began my 4-block walk to the square in the crisp morning air. A man who I recognized but didn't know pushed open his front screen door. He walked out in his bathrobe. His gray hair sticking up made him look like a madman. I laughed softly the moment he froze when seeing me, a man in full uniform walking the Salt Creek streets in his brightly polished shoes, bronze star, and garrison hat. The mayor was late, nowhere to be seen. Great. Figures. I sat in the chair that was marked with black marker on a piece of white copy paper. Reserved, Sergeant Finnegan Barrett. I was a bit frustrated at the mayor's tardiness, but I was happy to be seen in uniform by the workers and by those arriving early. Ned Wilson walked past me with a woman I'd not seen before. She looked comfortable on his arm like she was used to it. She looked young, and her eyes gave the look of stupidity. He didn't smile. He only nodded. I nodded back. I looked forward, falling into a snare drum trance. It held me tightly within my subconscious. I don't know how long I was like this when, "Honey bunny! Woohoo! Finnegan!" A woman's voice unexpectedly screeched with a familiar and sticky sweetness, giving me a start. It was my Aunt Bernice, smiling and blowing me kisses enthusiastically like a crazy person. She waved at me as if I were a 5-year-old about to sing my first solo. Seated next to her, disinterested, was my fat cousin Larry, who I'd not seen in a decade or more. Last I heard, he was in rehab for huffing canned air. Recently, he had graduated and moved back in with Aunt Bernice. Mom mentioned in a letter that he'd been coming around sometimes, just to see Dad, to ask for money, which he always gave. The muscles in my face engaged against their will as I forced a smile. I nodded, a little embarrassed, but raised my hand with a hello. People walked between us into a row of seats as they tried to count how many seats they wanted to save. They argued quietly about the number of people coming. I turned back again to face forward, partly in an effort to keep my uniform without wrinkle, but mostly because Larry made me uncomfortable. I continued my stare down of Mr. Browning and his fantastic display of insanity and patriotism. His unnaturally bright and straight teeth were hard to break away from. His son, the owner of Browning Hardware, possessed the same fake, pasted-on smile, but unlike his father, was developing an impressive receding hairline. For so many years I'd known these people, yet I didn't know them at all.
"Hey, boys,"
He'd joyfully holler as Troy and I pedaled past his shop nearly every day of the summer a lifetime ago, on our way to the Tasty Freeze to enjoy a soft-serve ice cream cone. Troy would say the same thing, loudly, each time we passed that shop. "Finny, you suppose they got a 2-for-1 deal at the dentist's?" I'm pretty sure he thought he was a comedian back then. If I was anything to him during that time, I was the one he could count on to laugh at his stupid jokes. The only time our entire youth that I told him he wasn't funny was when he went way beyond my zone of tolerance because I was the punchline that day. He had told the entire third-grade art class that I thought Mrs. Sellers was pretty. Not only was it humiliating, but it also made me hate a class that I otherwise loved. The square was becoming more and more busy as people arrived. It was filling up with the town's best. Most seemed eager to welcome me back, to thank me, to shake my hand. The American flag was in all forms that day. Flag patches were sewn onto vests. Little flags were stapled onto little sticks for little people to wave. On the podium was a large flag like the one that used to sit in our old high school auditorium. Maybe it was that flag, I thought. It hung heavily from a pole, was sharply dressed with golden yellow fringe. An American eagle spanned its wings on top. The stars and stripes were also in streamer form, woven with love and free labor throughout the gazebo's pickets and along the center aisle of the chairs, capped with banner bunting of the same material. And then my life changed. Walking toward me, from the side of the gazebo, past a busy group of conversation, was a vision I'd not seen before. A beauty that seemed to be a creation made up of a combination of morning lights and the perfect female form. She was set in the moment's composition, dead center. Against the texture below her were blades of grass, giving my eyes miniature prisms of light times 1,000,000. And above, the sun competed against the outline of her red hair. Her legs shone slightly through her dress as a white fabric summer silhouette. This sight seemed to block out all sounds except for a select few. A light chirp of her laughter and the pop of Old Glory in the light breeze. The noise of the band had disappeared for a moment. Finally, after a moment or two, the hum of the chatty and growing crowd entered back into my senses. All I could do was wonder what her hair would look like if it were let down, what her hand would feel like if she were ever to let me hold it. At that moment, she did offer it to me, her hand, only I didn't take it. She stood before me, demonstrating perfect handshake etiquette, with her hand extended. Her lips moved, and a puzzled look shone in her eyes. "Finnegan! Hey, Finnegan!" The voice was smoky, masculine, and undeniably Irish. It was Mr. Baker. I shook the cobwebs to employ the reality of the present. I looked at him. His hand flickered down by his side. His cigar was natural as it rested, formed between his thumb, index, and middle finger. La Aurora was printed on its band. He flicked it again. This time, a long gray ash had fallen. Suddenly, I realized that I was surrounded by an entourage of the pale-skinned beauty, one that included Mr. Baker. I took a deep breath, realizing my embarrassment, as if my thoughts of this girl were on display for the whole world to see. I took an inventory of all 5 people who stood before me. Next to Tom Baker was Ruth, who's died since. She stood next to him with her infectious smile and bright white hair. Mom had told me that the day of her funeral wasn't, of course, recognized as a day off for everyone, but it may as well have been. Everyone mourned. Everyone loved her, Mom had said. I mean everyone, even the people who didn't really know her. She was so kind to everyone. I'm Nora. Her hand was still extended, but a little closer to me, and she shook as a gesture and glanced down at her attempt to be social. I took her hand. Her grip was firm, but her hand was soft. Her voice was as beautiful as her eyes. It was southern, kind yet confident. I realized my eyes were on hers a bit too long. My face became warm, and hoping that the others didn't notice my blush only made it worse. "Hi, I'm Finnegan." I emphasized my name with a final pump of our handshake. I let go, but felt her fingers brush away until our hands fell to ourselves. "So I've heard. This is all for you, I understand." The way she spoke, it melted my heart. The other two, standing to my right, Nora's left, were her parents, Douglas and Vera. Later, they divorced, just after we were married, in fact. We all exchanged pleasantries, and they each expressed how proud they were of me. "Finnegan, you remember our oldest, Vera? Vera Callan now." I didn't. "This is her husband, Douglas, and their beautiful daughter, Nora. They're here from Georgia," said Mrs. Baker with a hand on each of Nora's shoulders, as if to say, "Looky here, Finnegan, looky here." "Oh," I nodded with my mouth pinched, expressing that I was impressed, already deducing that I'd just come from there, Georgia, realizing the blessed convenience. Mrs. Baker was smiling and looked put together, but she looked worn. The twinkle that usually accompanied her wasn't there that day. "St. Simon's Island," Mr. Baker bellowed, speaking to me but looking at his wife. He took his wife's hand, and she leaned into her grumpy old husband with a love, with an affection that was forever. I turned back to Nora. "Island?" I asked. "Yeah. Well, it's a barrier island. You drive across the marsh and bridges, waterways to get there." "That sounds incredible. I'm actually stationed at Fort Benning, in Georgia. That's where I'm at right now. Well, not right now. I'm right here right now, but you know what I mean." I pressed my teeth together and felt the strangeness show through my smile. My attempt at humor fell flat. "Yeah," she smiled. "You're funny. I get it. And I knew Fort Benning was in Georgia." She grinned at her parents. "What is wrong with you, Finnegan?" I thought. I was a little embarrassed, realizing that, of course, they'd know Fort Benning was actually in the state in which they resided. "I didn't know there were islands on the Georgia coast." "Well, now you know." Her comment was kind. I just smiled. Mr. Baker was preoccupied with the chairs. The others noticed his distraction. Nora turned her head from Mr. Baker back to me. "It was nice meeting you, Finnegan." She reached for a handshake again. I stood to shake her hand. As I stood, it caused me to stand a little too close. She backed up a step. I was acutely aware of her hand's touch. "It was nice meeting you too, Nora." I nodded and gave a half wave to the others as I let go. Mom and Dad walked up. Mom called out, "Ruth, hi!" They exchanged smiles and waves. Mom kissed my cheek as they were taking their reserved seats next to mine. Then I remembered. "Oh, Mrs. Baker, Mr. Baker," I said, wondering what in the world I was about to say. "Are you guys coming over for rhubarb pie after?" They looked at each other. "Are you inviting us?" asked Mrs. Baker with a bright, suspicious note, glancing toward Mom. "Yes, of course you're invited. Everybody is," I lied. Mom didn't even look up at me. The only people asked to come over, as far as what I was told, were family and the Wilsons. "What's rhubarb pie?" I heard Nora asking Mrs. Baker as they took their seats. I thought of nothing else but Nora that morning, stealing glances and sharing 3-second stares with her throughout the rest of the ceremony. Mayor Reese's speech, given from behind his own wooden lectern, was delivered with precision and practiced theatrics. I suspected he was still practicing, as he stood me up for the meeting he was so desperately wanting. He didn't drudge up any of my harmless juvenile shenanigans, stories my dad shared with him for the content of his speech. But he did bring up how I crashed and burned in my college attempt, and to improve his story, and because he thought Troy would be at the ceremony with me, he brought up how Troy and I were best friends growing up. How Troy ended up in trouble and booted from school, too. How we both were destined to be Salt Creek heroes. Oh, Troy, buddy, I wish you were here for this. The mayor went on to draw a general contrast as he compared the old Finnegan Barrett to the new and improved version of Finnegan Barrett, Salt Creek, South Dakota's newest Bronze Star recipient. He continued with how we each have such an opportunity to be new and improved. For a couple of minutes, it had turned into a pretty weird motivational speech, but it was well delivered. Finishing, he poked fun of Dad, an old friend, according to the mayor, although he'd never stepped foot in our home, not once. Still, Dad laughed and laughed, looking over his shoulder from the front row, trying to connect the humorous memories spoken of with as many of his peers as he could at the moment. His giant smile and red face showed everyone that he was bursting with joy on that day. The mayor did ask me to say a few words at the end. I did. Only a few. Then, as the townspeople applauded and the band played, I stood there, righteous before them, washed and clean. And then my eyes gave me a sight. A beautiful red-headed girl, the most beautiful creature I'd ever seen. And the applause, the music, they washed away with a sea of possibility. 2. Mom and Nora had been talking for over an hour. They'd connected over their shared love for cheap costume jewelry, so much that Mom had abandoned her traditional role of keeping party food and drinks fresh. "Nora, look at these," Mom said, as she pulled out ropes of red, yellow, and brown beads. "Oh, Mrs. Barrett, these are incredible." "Call me Cheryl. I got these when Jimmy and I went to Rapid City last year. Well, I didn't really get them. I was looking at them. We were at a cute little stand inside a flea market out there. They were more money than I wanted to spend. When we got home, Jimmy handed me a cute little box. This box. And there they were. That devil. He's such a good man." "Aw, that's really sweet. He just got them for you and didn't say anything?" Nora said in her perfectly southern drawl. I was becoming increasingly frustrated with each pass by the kitchen table without so much as a glance from my secret love. I'd been drinking root beer nonstop since we got home that afternoon. With frequency, I'd excuse myself to the restroom, then back to the kitchen to refill, then back to the living room. It had gotten late, about 7 o'clock, when Aunt Bernice and Larry made rounds. Aunt Bernice reached up, grabbed my face with both hands, gave me a big kiss right on the nose in front of everyone. In front of Nora. Then she squeezed my cheeks and slapped me lightly, endearingly. "You're such a good boy. I'm so proud of you. I love you, little one." "Oh," she said as she reached into her past. "Oh, when Cheryl told me she was pregnant," she said with joy and pride in her eyes. Then, looking down at the black and white name tag on my chest, she patted it. "Barrett. Yep, you're a Barrett, all right." I looked and was happy to see that Nora was paying attention to this exchange. Or at least I was glad to see her looking in my direction with a sort of fondness. She didn't smile. She just watched, interested. The front door swung open. Larry was ducking out without saying anything. I'd not spoken to him the entire time he was at the house. "Larry, hold on, buddy," Dad yelled, chasing him out the door. "What's that about?" I asked. "Your dad is giving him money. That'd be my bet," Aunt Bernice said, still holding me. "What for?" "I saw Larry talking with him in the living room. If Larry's talking with anybody, I'm afraid it's just to get something from them. But anyways," she leaned in as if to encourage me to lean toward her. I did. She whispered, "I think it would be a good idea if you asked that girl to go see a movie and maybe get a burger. Don't you agree?" I don't. Did she say something?" "No, but her parents left an hour ago to eat supper at the baker's, and I kind of doubt she's hanging around for your mom." She winked at me. We both stood looking at Nora. She was leaned over the table, helping Mom with different ensembles. Just then, Mom pushed back away from the table. "Bea, was that Larry leaving already?" "Yes, sweetie, I'm afraid it's time for us to go. At least before he gets anything out of Jimmy." Mom laughed uncomfortably. "We have a few extra dollars." "Stop, Cheryl, we've talked about that. Anyways, love, we have to get home. We had such a good time. And Finnegan, oh, Finnegan, we're so proud of you. We worried the whole time you were out there. Please, take some of this pie. I made way too much, and I don't have room in the freezer." "I suppose Lawrence would eat it." She turned toward the door. "Lawrence, do you want some pie for later?" The door swung open. It was Dad. "Larry said he was walking home, Bernice. Told me you'd take too long with goodbyes," Dad chuckled. Aunt Bernice sighed loudly, wrapped up a piece of pie, kissed everyone, and walked out. 3. "Mom, would it be okay if I skipped supper? If we skipped supper?" She looked from the kitchen, through the living room, and out the front door, where Nora was standing, waiting for me. Mom smiled and judged me with her eyes. "I think that would be okay. Are you two going somewhere? Are you going to wear your uniform, or are you going to change?" "Do you think I should change? Do I look like an idiot wearing this out to get a burger?" "I should change." "Honey, I promise you look fine. Very handsome. I was just wondering, that's all." "You sure?" "I'm sure." Standing, I blinked at Mom. I ran to the door. "Nora, I'll be right out. Gotta change." 4. I dug through the keys hanging on the wall. "Where are the keys to the Buick?" "Oh, that's right. Oh, your car isn't ready yet. How long does it take to get an oil change?" "Your dad took it to Johnny's to get the brakes done. He didn't want you trying to take it to Georgia with bad brakes." "Oh, okay," I conceded. "Crap. I can give you kids a ride if you want. Or you can take the van. I'm not going anywhere." "Mom, I'll look like a creep driving her around in that thing." "Sorry? You think I look like a creep?" "Mom, no, I look like a creep, that's all. It's okay, we can walk. I just gotta piss. Use the latrine. Sorry, Mom. Can you tell her I'm coming?" "Okie dokie, but if you change your mind by the time you get where you're going, give me a call." 5. I'd already paid for our meal, and Lou's tip still sat between us. The jukebox was quiet. It had been for I don't know how long, as Nora and I talked. I'd taken my eyes off her for a second, scanning the establishment. Lou was sweeping around the tables. It was then, at that time, I first realized how much of a dump Lou's place was. The drop ceiling was stained a variation of browns. The booths on the corners were torn and showed the white mesh backing of the vinyl. There was a hole in the wall about the size of a fist. The top of the table was clean enough for me, I suppose. I began to wonder about the kitchen. "I love this place," Nora said. "Seriously?" I squeaked. My voice traveled in an echo across the grungy linoleum floor. "I heard that," Lou shouted playfully. Lou's was the only place open, besides the new diner on the edge of town. I wasn't familiar with the new place, and we were walking, so Lou's it was. We each had a cheeseburger and a beer. The fries we each ordered sat mostly untouched. They had a funny taste, of which neither of us mentioned. The light was fading and turning into more blue than yellow. It caused a new color to settle upon Nora. From the front window, her hair was cast into a purple hue. Still amazing. "You kids better mind the weather. Storms in the area, you know." He threw his table rag over his shoulder, crossed his arms, and glared past us at the sky. "Hey, it was good seeing you, old man," I said. "You too, kid. And you too, Nora. It was nice meeting you. Keep this kid straight." He took the towel from his shoulder and acted like he was popping me with it as he winked. He walked away. And tell Troy Wilson I said hello. Okay, I will. 6. I'm sorry my car wasn't ready. It's kind of a piece of shit, so Dad had to get some things fixed before I head back to Benning in a couple days. The whole time we were in the desert, it's just been sitting there, I said. We were just strolling, as if the dark clouds building above us were meaningless. It's okay, I like walking. She punched me in the arm. Keeps a person humble. I smiled, relieved at her kindness. There was a small rumble of thunder in the distance. Finnegan, do you believe in God? What do you mean, like Jesus, church, and all that? Well, I mean, do you believe that He's in control? That we're His creation? That we're destined or predestined for things? After a few steps, and me not answering too quickly, Nora said apologetically, It's all right. You don't need to answer. No, it's okay. There's a guy in 608th, Lopez. He talks about God a lot. And, well, Scud missiles were falling everywhere, all around us one night. We were down in a bunker together. I mean, there wasn't anything we could do. We couldn't fight the enemy. They were launching from forever away. We were just kind of a target, you know? So I said to Lopez, and I meant it. If we get hit, I hope it's a direct hit. Nora slipped her hand into mine as we continued to walk at our slow pace. A rush of fire came over me as I recalled that night. I gathered my thoughts and continued. He said to me, Barrett, if it's God's will, it will happen. You know what? Before then, I kind of thought he was crazy and just said things, you know? People say things about who they are or were before they signed up. I think it's mostly lies. Anyways, he said that kind of thing all the time. But that time, that night in that bunker, well, he just said it in the face of death, you know? Like death was just another thing. I was holding her hand. I didn't want it to stop. I continued. There's been times that I think that I breathed deeply. Maybe God is real. We walked quietly for a block or so. Then I asked, What about you? Do you believe in God? Yes, without a doubt. Her answer was quick, her confidence surprising. We're Catholic. Not that being Catholic matters much. At least I don't believe that being a Catholic saves your soul. Her countenance changed as if she offended me, as if that were the criteria from where she came. What I mean is our family is Catholic. We're from Ireland, and England way before that, but we moved here from Ireland as a family when my mama was just a baby. So were we. Irish. Dad's kind of a nut about it. Your mom told me, but you guys don't go to church or anything like that? No. Mom told you that? I was surprised Mom shared something so intimate. Nora didn't answer. Dad says we're all screwed up sinners. Just some of us admit it and some of us don't, I said, hoping she'd smile at my comment. She did smile. I like your dad. He seems nice. I didn't say anything more about Dad, as a flare of that moment in time came to me as a terrible cry from my mother, a cry that feared the worst. I watched our steps and the shadows as the streetlights painted our path. I paid close attention to our connection, swinging along together. Have you ever been to a Protestant church, Finnegan? A what? A Christian church that isn't Catholic. Like Methodist or Lutheran? Yeah, there are lots of them, but yeah. No. Well, no, not really. I don't remember except for Easter when I was a kid, and right before they shipped us off, we were in a mandatory meeting at the gym. That was pretty much church. The guy preaching was pretty serious about it, too. The sky flashed. She looked down, watching her feet. Why are you asking anyways? I said. She didn't answer. Finnegan. Yeah, Nora, I teased, imitating her tone and enjoying the sound of her name. Thunder. It was a little louder now, yet still off in the distance. I waited, but Nora didn't speak. We stopped next to an abandoned lot that was positioned between two empty homes within that dying little town. The streetlight closest to the center of it was out, allowing for darkness to cast over with only spots of light moving in and out as the wind moved the trees. We stood on the edge of the street in the faded dark. No cars, no anything. Just the sounds of the natural summer, conjuring up unrest in the atmosphere. The lot had, in the middle of it, a decaying foundation and a freestanding chimney with no house to accompany it. It had been in this condition for as long as I could remember. There were also, left behind, on the side of where the back door would have been, a heavy concrete set of stairs. Nora stepped into me closely, and we looked at one another with young anticipation. Then, with the grace of a dancer, she raised one hand. She grabbed my collar to pull me onto her lips. Our tongues met quickly. Our breath mixed passionately. I could feel the cotton fabric of her dress moving against her skin as we embraced. Realizing my discovery was advancing quickly, I repositioned my inexperienced hands to the skin of her arms, above her elbows. But then, with no control, I moved them up to her bare white, slightly sun-kissed shoulders. My body trembled as if it were cold, only it was very warm. Our lips were learning one another. Our hands were becoming more confident with one another, careless even. Her neck was bright, even in the shadows. I left her lips for breath as I explored, going slightly further each time. She leaned into me. She pressed against me. "Finnegan?" I ascended from her neck. "Yeah." She grabbed my hand and led me to the lot. Nora stepped onto a broken block on the backside of the steps, where the house would have been. She leaped from the block and sat on the 5th step, the top step. I stood facing her at arm's length. I leaned in as I was drawn again to kiss her lips. With my foot, I pushed the block to the side and stepped into her. Her dress and her knees pressed against my ribs. I felt my shirt being pulled and becoming untucked. I paused, catching my breath. I was taken in by her eyes. She looked down at herself, at us, then back up to capture my gaze. She lifted my hand and positioned it on her breast. I curled my fingers over the top edge of her dress. My other hand followed. I froze there. I waited for her permission. The smell of rain approached in a sudden gust of cool wind. The softness of Nora's hand caressed my face as she kissed me. "Yes," she whispered. A distant flash of light illuminated the clouds in the southwestern sky. And in spite of the current events, through a developed habit, I counted in my head. 1,000, 1,000. Crack! Nora flinched. Through my heavy breath, I asked, giving her a chance to escape the passion between us, "Do you want me to get you to the baker's, to your grandparents' house, before it rains?" "No," she answered. Nora leaned back just enough that her hands found a balance behind her on the steps below, and the rain began to fall. 7. We held hands. Nora had been talking for 2 blocks about how I could visit her before she started back to school. She was enrolled at the College of Coastal Georgia. I was interested in this conversation, but my heart was still pounding. We were soaking wet. She was walking lightly, up on her toes, hopping over the new puddles, forcing my arm to swing with an exaggeration, together with hers, fingers interlocked. "You'll love the Golden Isles, Finnegan. Sometimes just because. We walk the beach at night after dinner. There's nothing like it. Oh, and this was a nice storm. I mean, a very nice storm, considering how we, experienced it." She smiled and kissed my cheek quickly. "But when you see the colors of a sunset just after a storm, Finnegan, I promise it'll take your breath away. Sometimes we go out with one of my daddy's friends on his crab boat."
Nora, I said, with a tone of confession.
Yeah? She stopped us. She looked at me with concern. What's wrong? I couldn't make eye contact at first, and then, finally, I forced myself. Her green eyes looked dark, even brown, in the shadows of the passing storm. I wanted to say to her, that was my first time, or, I think I love you. But instead, I said, I want to come see where you live. Like right away? I raised my eyebrows to convey my confusion. Well, I suppose walking with you anywhere makes that place the best place to be.
I think walking on a beach with you would be pretty incredible.
If you really want me to.
I looked at her as we began walking again. She was smiling.
Finnegan, I hope you're for real. Distant thunder broke the silence that followed. I'm not easy, she said humbly, causing the conversation to become a little uncomfortable. I've never done anything like that before. I had a boyfriend for 2 years.
He cheated on me. And, never mind. She shook her head.
No, it's okay. Please, seriously. Nora stopped and kicked her feet up, one by one, to take off her shoes. Then we continued. Hesitantly, she said,
I finally gave in to his pressure. He was my first, and only that once since then. Until tonight.
I was satisfied completely with the look she gave me. Her mascara had run from her eyes, and her hair was matted and hanging heavy with the storm's water. She held me in her stare.
I wish you were my first. Anyways, the next day, after he finally got what he wanted, he broke up with me. He broke my heart. Undoubtedly, he had been doing it with Ann Silla for months while we were still together. Got her pregnant. Then the jackass denied it and didn't want anything to do with her after that. A couple of months later, Ann's parents were moving her and her whole giant family to Savannah, over an hour away. Her dad was a deacon at their church. They voted him out. I guess it was a big thing. Now I kind of feel sorry for her. I slowed our walk, realizing we were only a block from the baker's, understanding the night was coming to an end. Your aunt called you Finny. Is that just what she calls you, or do a lot of people call you that? I don't know what's so hard about Finnegan, but as long as I remember, people have called me whatever they want. I don't mind as long as Finn is part of the name. I'm okay with it. What do you want me to call you? What do you want me to call you? I don't know. Maybe we should let time tell. You know, Grandma Baker says you've never had a girlfriend.
I was embarrassed. What does she know? I've been in the army. I've been in college, kind of. She doesn't know. Easy, lover boy. I'm just saying what she said. She meant it as a compliment, really. She said you were a good boy. She smiled, waiting for me to smile. The porch light was on at the baker's home. The front screen door opened. There they are, Mrs. Baker said, with a little worry but relief in her voice. I heard a group of laughter. I knew she was okay as long as she was with a war hero, rattled Mr. Baker. He followed his voice outside. One hand held a beer, and the other reached out, embracing his wife's waist. Their bodies were postured as if they were in their 20s, in love. Her mother, Vera, called out to Nora. Hey, honey, did you kids have fun? Where were you? She walked down the sidewalk to meet us at the street. In the darkness, maybe because she was wearing a white t-shirt, she looked even more sun-baked than before. Oh my goodness, you two are soaking wet. We were just out walking and got caught in the storm, Mama. She lifted her shoes to show how they were waterlogged. You didn't think to find cover? She barked lightly, but her rebuke changed to a stretched grin as she realized Nora and I had our hands interlocked. I guess you're getting along. Her voice sang with pleasure. Not a blissful pleasure, but one coupled with intelligence and wisdom. It was easy to identify she was an educated woman, yet carefree.
I didn't even think to let go of her hand. It felt right.
She must have felt the same. "It's my fault, Vera, Mrs. Callan," I said, wondering if I should let go of our grip.
"It's not a big deal,"
Nora interjected.
"It was kind of nice. Don't you think so, Finn?"
She squeezed my hand, reaffirming our posture. "Yeah, it was real nice, Nora. Only I wanted to say,
"It was perfect.
and I think I love you." "Well, sweetie, you need to come in and get a warm shower and get some sleep. We're leaving early tomorrow." The answer to the question I didn't want to ask was there, hanging there. We stared at each other. Vera darted off back toward the house. "Douglas, they're holding hands."
"Yeah, I'll leave tomorrow, Finnegan."
"Early?
"Yeah."
So I guess maybe you could come by in the morning." "Okay, what time?"
5:30.
Yelled an eavesdropping mother from the front porch. Nora exhaled from her slight embarrassment.
"Mom, please."
"Come on, everybody, they want privacy," her mom said with a tease.
"Oh, they're so cute,"
said Mrs. Baker. "Honey, come on," Mr. Baker said, holding the door open and waving his wife and the rest in. I felt a tug on my wrists, pulling me down.
I turned to Nora's face looking up at me, her wet hair turned over her ears.
The freckles on her sweet face seemed to have been placed there, delicately, by an experienced artist. They moved across the top of her cheeks and bridge of her nose like a group of refugees crossing a small hill.
"I think they like you,"
Nora said to me. "It's because of the ceremony."
"Maybe. It doesn't hurt anyways." "Tomorrow morning?"
"Yep.
Nora."
Yeah? This was the best night of my entire life." As soon as I said it, I thought I'd made a dramatic overstatement. After all, this wasn't her first. She was mine.
"Finnegan?"
I said nothing. "I hope you come to St. Simon's to see me." She sounded slightly defeated. "It would kill me if you didn't."
"As soon as I can."
I looked toward the house. Nora followed my eyes.
It looked all clear, and we met each other with tenderness.
I couldn't sleep that night. Each hour was filled with thoughts of her, innocent thoughts and otherwise. I could hear her voice, feel her touch.
I was in love, and I couldn't wait until I saw her again.